this week, a pretty significant shift happened in the financial markets. Some of you may or may not be aware of it, but there's this thing called the petrodollar, which is no more. Back in 1971, we had gotten off what's called the gold standard, meaning that the actual paper money in your pocket, you could exchange it for an actual piece of gold at the local bank. There was a connection between the dollar and gold. In 1971, the United States got off of the gold standard, which meant that your fiat money was created, also known as paper money with no backing. It was created, and shortly thereafter, in 1972, we made an agreement, the United States, with Saudi Arabia as a way to prop up the United States dollar for the world. We made an agreement that said anybody who buys oil from Saudi Arabia, they have to use United States dollars in order to purchase that transaction. And in exchange, we will support you, we will support the trade routes, we will act as the policing arm of the world in order to make sure the oil flows. We will provide you with any arms or defense that you might need. Your monopoly on oil, more or less, will be protected by the United States, but you have to use the dollar, which would then protect the dollar. So that agreement recently expired, and there was no negotiation that anybody has talked about here. But the issue is, if the dollar isn't backed by anything, then it can create an inflation or a hyperinflation environment. What's even more concerning, however, is that each country's currency competes with the others. So that's why you have a supply and demand, and that's why we talk about the US dollar versus the euro or versus the yen or versus whatever, because they all are in competition. If there is no longer a demand for the United States dollar, or a demand, more importantly, for U.S. bonds that are being created to go deeper and deeper into debt, if nobody wants that junk anymore because Saudi Arabia signs up with a different country to use their currency, well, now hyperinflation may start to roll in with the U.S. Side note, if Saudi Arabia decides to have everybody purchase Bitcoin in exchange for their oil, that would be the best story that can come from this, is Bitcoin goes parabolic and all countries around the world have to purchase Bitcoin in order to buy the oil. Now, other than extreme fantasy that I have about that, what will happen in the U.S. is if the dollar is no longer of value, or the debt that we have is no longer of value, it'll become harder and harder to go into debt because no other countries will buy the debt that we create. And the Federal Reserve will then be the backstop to purchase the debt that the United States government needs. Side note, the Fed does not have any reserves and is technically not federal. But what they'll do is they'll create money from nothing to purchase these bonds or purchase this debt that the government creates. So now everybody is on the hook for paying back to the government, and the government's on the hook to pay back to this central bank, which never had the money to begin with. What hyperinflation looks like is two parts. There is a immediate rise in prices of everything that you want to purchase: computers, food, gas, whatever. The price will go up. It'll become harder and harder to purchasing or to buy things, because the exchange for the dollar versus the item that you're buying will continue to get worse and worse and worse. So items will become more scarce, prices will be driven up. But on the flip side, prices will also be driven up on hard assets. Hard assets meaning there's a limited or a scarce supply of those assets that you can be backed by something. So in a hyperinflationary environment, people are trying to put their money in a place that will keep up with this inflation, and historically the best and most common place would be the stock market. So you're going to see a stock market ripping when inflation comes roaring back, and everyone's going to try to stay ahead of inflation, ahead of the cost of living, by investing in the market, or just by trying to stay flat, to be quite honest. If you own anything that is scarce, such as gold, silver, real estate, Bitcoin, anything that has a hard backing, and has a scarce supply of, those prices will rip up as well. And so what will happen is those who have assets and those who don't will become further and further apart like you wouldn't believe. So this week, I bet a year, 5 years, 10 years from now will be as monumental as 1971 was when we got off of the gold standard. Just wrapping this up, thank you so much for me just kind of riffing here, doing something a bit different, but I feel like this petrodollar thing has such a significant opportunity to change world finances, and no one seems to be aware of it or care about it. So I just thought I'd bring it up and have some folks kind of listen to me rant about it. So thank you so much. If you're here till the end, I appreciate it. As always, stay inquisitive, stay informed, and stay subscribed for more. My name is Agabus. We'll talk to you soon.